Friends, the Winnipeg Jets continue their march towards a playoff spot as they look to seek another victory, this one against the Detroit Red Wings. There have been some minor lineup changes and some things to watch out for from a Red Wings team that is less tanky than it's been in seasons past. So we'll dive into this game and what to expect, plus some interesting discussion around the Jets' trade plans on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so is 100% free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Now, on tonight's episode, like I said, wanted to dive into the Detroit Red Wings today. Obviously, this is going to be not exactly a major game for the Jets. It's not like a game that's like a must-win. But now Winnipeg is starting to kick off a pretty decent stretch of like 8 or so games on the road. So it's going to be a long while before we see, a stretch back at home. And road games are always a fun test. And honestly, the Red Wings, they are not as bad as they've been in years past. When you look at the standings, they're only trailing the Panthers by 1 point, if you can believe it. Detroit has like 3 games in hand on this Panthers team too. So as you can tell, it's been a rough season for the new Paul Maurice-led Florida Panthers. But the Red Wings, you know what? They are a team that's still in transition, still kind of learning how to adapt towards the higher expectations now. Previous years, this team, I think we've seen their lowest lows where they were only winning a handful of games a season, and we're definitely on track more for top 10 picks and lottery picks than they were a potential wild card berth. And I think this year they're still off that pace. I don't think that they're really going to be good enough to maybe reach that next level. But all the same, the Jets really can't take them too lightly. And especially when you're dealing with guys like Dylan Larkin, Philip Roenick, Kubalik, Perron, even, Andrew Copp still doing his thing, Lucas Raymond also having a pretty good season. I don't think that this Red Wings team has like a crazy level of offense. I mean, you're looking at the squad, and generally speaking, once you get past the top 6, the scoring sort of dries up really quickly. But that doesn't mean that they can't hurt you on stuff like the power play or at even strength. The power play especially is going to be a tough thing for the Jets to deal with. This is a good unit, especially spearheaded by Larkin. He is a phenomenal player and very clearly their number one star. But when you've got a good supporting cast, you've got the veteran savvy of Perron, who always seems to do well against the Jets. You've got Kubalik and a few others. Fronik, especially, kind of being one of the bigger surprises this season. But, he's not the only really good player. There's Moritz Seider. And, of course, like I said, Rasmussen, Kopp, Berggren, who maybe hasn't had the world's best start to the season, but, continues to sort of adapt to the NHL level and figure out his role with the Red Wings. So an interesting team. One that I think I would still expect 2 points against. I think the Jets certainly have the firepower for it. And when you look at the Red Wings goaltending, most of their goalies are sub 9-10 save percentage. So, I think all the signs point to Winnipeg doing well, especially with the Jets having a healthier roster. Now, speaking of the Jets, they did make 1 or 2 lineup changes, one of which is going to be more of a game time decision. Kevin Stenlund might be coming out in place of David Gustafsson, just depending on Stenlund's health. I think that this would be necessary anyways. The fourth line hasn't been so good recently, and Gustafsson could certainly do with some time. We all know that he's a fabulous depth player and somebody who, at some point, I still think has a higher ceiling and a higher level of play to reach Whether that's with the Jets or someone else, I don't know for sure. But, either way, I do have high expectations for his eventual longer term NHL career. But for the time being, I think the biggest thing um, for Gustafsson is just getting back in. The other change is Dylan Sandberg coming out for Ville Heinola. And I think this Heinola switch is interesting. Ville, of course, has been mentioned by Bones as needing to have a longer stretch of games. Sandberg recently has been a little bit shaky, although I don't know that it's necessarily all on him. I think part of Sandberg's recent rough stretch was especially noticeable alongside Pionk, and it was less on Dylan and probably more on Neil. Pionk, unfortunately, has just been really bad. I mean, there's no other way to really sugarcoat it. I think we all are seeing it. I think Pionk definitely knows that his performance levels have really tailed off this year, and we're kind of getting the sense that, as much as we wish it wasn't the case, that North Division season was probably more of the anomaly than it was an indicator of what Pionk would be for this team in the future. So I think longer term, the Jets really have some tough calls to make. Pionk, every game it's getting worse and worse. Some of his performances the past few weeks have probably been among the worst in his entire career. And I just don't know what you do with him other than try to find either a team that can be a better fit for him, or try and shelter him because, unfortunately, it's just defensively a mess. Offensively, he's still bringing some pretty solid value, but it's not enough to cancel out the defensive lapses, the turnovers, the poor PKing, all of that stuff. It's all kind of outweighing any of the good that he does. And offensively, he's still pretty sharp. I mean, he's got good skating, he's got that great passing and vision in certain areas, but the other parts of his game, especially the transition, the defensive zone exits, the body checking and the marking and stuff, all of that has really taken a step back. And so, I think it leaves the door open for guys like Heinola, Sandberg to really step up, especially as the Jets probably want to free up some cap space and maybe look to swap out a defender for a forward. So something to keep an eye on, but we will kind of table that for now and think about the future. In just a little bit, I do want to explore and talk about some interesting conversations around the Jets and what they're looking for, what they're trying to, I think, target, and where I think Winnipeg might have some congruencies with some other teams looking to maybe make a deal. But before we go any further, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at betonline.net. BetOnline is your number one source for all of the sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis you need this season, whether you're looking to track professional or amateur sports. They've got everything from pro football to college bowl season. They've also got, of course, basketball, both collegiate and professional. And if you're looking for a post-World Cup hangover, they've got all of the return to domestic league action that you could possibly handle, whether you're interested in England, Spain, Germany, Italy, etc., all of the great footballing leagues. And if you also want sports coverage and podcasts, they've got plenty of those, letting you plug into your sport 24/7 however you want. And as always, they're still the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix on, so be sure to head on over to betonline.net right now on your laptop or mobile device to register for a free account, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We are just moving on now, talking about some conversations some folks have had about the Jets trade situations and where things stand. Some stuff on, coming from Friedman, some from Merrick, all of the speculation around the Jets, because I think people are starting to realize and cue in on the fact that when it comes to competitors and buying teams, the Jets might be one of the best positioned squads to make some kind of a splash. How big of a splash? Hard to say. But I think everyone can see that Winnipeg is probably at a point where, it's a playoff caliber team, but it's not yet at a playoff contender level. And I don't mean that in the sense that the Jets are going to be like a one and done round kind of thing, right? I think we're more talking about what are their prospects for surviving to the semifinals, the finals, all of that kind of stuff. The conference finals are a very big test for the Jets. You have to survive a lot of hockey to reach that point, and Winnipeg has only advanced to that stage once in its entire existence. So this is obviously a very big question of how to really get the most out of this team and sort of take advantage of maybe some roster strengths that they can trade from. And I think, on the defensive side of things, the Jets are looking for, some kind of a boost, right? The right side right now, it's okay, but you've got DeMello, you've got Schmidt, and then Pionk. And I think all three of those guys, to some degree, have varying levels of value. But I think Pionk, for me, is probably the guy who I would say at some point is going to have to be cut loose. I know that he still gets a lot of minutes for this team, but the Jets are looking for uh, a boost at forward. But one name that did seem to pop up as a potential trade option and maybe a swap if you were looking at one of the higher salary D-men for the Jets, it would be Ivan Provorov. I believe this was either Friedman or Merrick who was speculating on Provorov potentially being somebody that the Jets are after even now because Bones has been really good with puck moving, active, attacking D, and I think especially with the renaissance of Josh Morrissey. Right? Let's be honest. We sort of look back at Morrissey's career, and I don't know that any of us really expected what we're seeing with like Norris caliber stuff out of Josh. Not even in like our wildest dreams. And it really shows how much the previous coaching staffs and systems were holding him back. And looking at Provorov's underlying numbers, what he's accomplished up to this point in his career, how much he's played, there are some signs that maybe if you get him away from the Flyers, he might legitimately be a really good top four attacking defender. Now, is he going to solve every single defensive issue the Jets have? Absolutely not. I think in a lot of ways, what we're looking for here is probably like break even in certain areas, but I think that would be a pretty big impact with how bad Neal has been this year. If you look at some of the with or without you stuff, the defensive zone coverages with Pionk on the ice versus with him off the ice for the Jets are like drastically different, so different it's almost hard to put into words how much there's a drop off from Pionk and like the next best skater. So it's been a really tough year for Neal. I think we're going to have to figure out longer term how to swap him, but um, Provorov I think is interesting for me. The challenge with him is he's got like I think 2 more years after this season, and his cap hit's not small. It's like 6.2-ish million or something around that range. So it's not cheap. It does come with considerable risk when you're thinking about it. But if you are paying a little bit more to maybe bring someone like him in while moving out Pionk's salary, it might actually be an upgrade in the longer term. That said, I do kind of wonder if the Jets would really be interested in that. It is like I said, a bit of a gamble. The Jets don't have a lot of cap room to take on a number of project players that they can't really guarantee are going to be upgrades. And term and price are really important for the Jets right now. It's something that they're thinking about when it comes to some of the trade options that are available on the forward market. I've identified a couple of players, like I said, that I'm very interested in, but um, I think one thing the Jets are not so interested in is pure rentals. I think Winnipeg is really looking to consolidate some resources and make a more concerted push for somebody with term, which is kind of why I'm starting to think maybe somebody like Ilya Mikheyev or a Brock Besser type or something is more of what the Jets are looking at. Connor Garland's still out there as well. Anthony Manta, I've previously mentioned, was an option. He's having a really down year with the Caps, and he's recently been getting healthy scratched. So at this point, the Caps may be willing to give him away. I don't even know what the situation is there. But all that to say, I think the Jets are thinking, for the next 2 seasons, they want to be as competitive and as close as humanly possible. And it starts this year. So I think that there is reason to believe that for once Winnipeg is going to be proactive on the trade market. I don't know when it's going to happen. I think that they were waiting out this current injury crisis to see, what are our primary, what are their primary needs still. In my opinion, I think we knew what those needs were all along, but I guess the Jets are just, they are who they are. The front office doesn't move at a particularly fast speed, and they're still trying to accrue cap space. I'm sure that they're hoping to try and stretch this for as long as humanly possible before some more guys hit IR. So something to keep an eye on. But, for the Jets so far, it's been a really good start to the season. And if they make an acquisition or two, maybe a swap, this team could really be pushed into, you know, potentially championship caliber. I really am a firm believer that this Jets team is really on the road to recovery. It's in the right frame of mind for the process. and they're really improving and getting better at a lot of different things. So really refreshing to see, but of course they've still got business to take care of against the Red Wings, and in just a little bit we'll also take a look at the rest of their upcoming schedule, because Winnipeg's schedule does get pretty condensed or pretty packed from here, and they've got some really tough games on the road that are not going to be super fun for the Jets to have to contend with, considering who they're going to be facing. But after that, their schedule comes back home for a while and things start to relax heading into February. But we will talk about that in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Athletic Greens. Our next partner has a product that I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because I was looking for a boost to my immune system, what with RSV, COVID, and the flu all going around. This is a really important time to make sure that your immune system is up and fighting against all of the nasty viruses that are out there. And if you're wondering what AG1 from Athletic Greens is, it is a single delicious scoop that gives you 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole food source superfoods with some probiotics and adaptogens. It's great for helping you form an easy daily micro habit. It helps to replace that expensive cold brew habit, and it's also less than $3 a day, so it's significantly cheaper. And for a lot of you lifestyle-focused folks, if you're on keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free diets, AG1 supports all of those, and it comes with less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. And best of all, there's no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or no artificial sweeteners or anything like that really takes away from it and fills your body with stuff that you don't need. And you don't have to just take my word for it. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews, so take it from all of their wonderful customer base, folks who are just like you, looking for a really healthy alternative to some of those pills and stuff that you're probably already ingesting. And right now, it's time to reclaim your health. There's never been a better time, and this is a great time to arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every single day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Hey, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. We're just wrapping up real quickly with some final thoughts on Winnipeg's upcoming road schedule, which is pretty packed. Obviously, the next few weeks are going to be really important for the Jets to tour through the Eastern Conference and get a sense of some of the higher scoring offenses out there and where the Jets sort of stack up against these opponents. After taking on the Wings tonight, they will then move on to Buffalo, then Pittsburgh. They'll come back home for a game against the Yotes, which should be a nice bit of a relief, like a bit of a break. But then they've got Montreal, Toronto, and then Ottawa. So it's like a nice Canadian tour for a few days, closing out the road trip with the Flyers and Preds. They do actually have a schedule of back-to-backs here, too. That first set of the Sabres and Penguins games, those are back-to-backs, which is always going to be fun. That'll be at the end of this week, and I think that for me is probably where I expect at least one loss. I think these teams are pretty difficult. The Sabres have a really high-flying offense this year. They're scoring a ton. Tage Thompson is obliterating opponents. It'll be interesting to see how the Jets fare against them, because the goaltending and defense have been kind of an issue at times this year, but the Sabres still have enough offensive and scoring punch where it's not really been an issue. And as far as the Pens are concerned, this team is resurgent. They're looking like how we usually expect them to. Mike Sullivan with Crosby continues to work his magic. Pittsburgh, always a tough, opponent for the Jets. Winnipeg has gotten by them before, but it's usually been by very close margins. So we'll see how this Jets team fares. It's going to be a different experience under Bones versus how it was with Paul Maurice. But I do think that at least one of these games is going to be a loss. And not because, again, like I said, the Jets are bad or anything. It's just with how good some of these squads have played, and a back-to-back being a really tough ask when you've got Hellebuck and Riddick starting opposite games. We'll see. I could be surprised. I think we've seen, number of opportunities here where the Jets have at least collected a point when it seemed like they really shouldn't. But, Winnipeg, they've really hung in tough this year. It just might be a little bit much to ask for 4 points on that first little or back-to-back stretch on the road. I think the other really tough team is going to be, of course, Toronto. this Leaf squad, I mean, look, they've got their issues, and Winnipeg has certainly played them pretty tightly, but on the road, it is a tough ask to try and face them and beat them. I am hoping that Winnipeg pulls it off because it's always nice when Winnipeg beats any of the major Canadian franchises, but especially the more successful ones. So, hoping for a big win, and we will see how that one pans out. But of course, the Jets are going to just finish up the next couple of games. We have a busy week ahead, so stay tuned throughout the rest of the month for all of the fun stuff coming up on the schedule. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks for everything, and we will see you throughout the rest of the week and rest of January with more coverage. As always, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. And as always, thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.